Before we get into this video, I just want to say that this whole video is going to contain a lot of spoilers since I'm going to be talking about the ending of part 6 of JoJo, and I only been watching the anime up to this point. Before I started reading the part 6 of JoJo, I heard a lot of mixed things about it, and apparently this is the least popular part of the JoJo saga. But I didn't want to wait any longer for the anime, so I was like, screw it, so I started reading it, and it ended up being one of my favorite parts. Before we talk about the ending, let's talk about the main character of this part, which is Jolene. This character ended up being one of my favorite JoJo's, which is honestly not saying much, since for some reason the main characters always end up being the least developed characters in the show. Besides Jonathan Joestar, where we see his entire life, while with other JoJo's they kind of just show up and they have a certain gimmick to them, like, with Josuke it's like, oh, don't touch my hair or I'll get angry. But they just, show up and save the day. But when the manga first started, I was a little worried because it just started like part 3 where Jolene was in jail, just like how Jotaro was, which was cool. But then he started talking about masturbating and showing her naked and stuff, so I was like, oh, is this just gonna be like Jotaro with tits and they're just gonna make sex jokes the entire time? But they actually developed her character and she ended up being a very cool character besides just being a sex object. Or being the opposite of that when they're just going, yay, girl power. Which I hate both because both are just poor writing. But thankfully it wasn't either of those. Her stand I found to be boring, to be honest. She's kind of like Spider-Man where she can turn her body into a string. Like, it wasn't really used in any creative ways. Like, they made it so that she can like fit into like a small tube in this part, which was cool, but for me it just wasn't used in any interesting ways. Like, she can do stuff like stitch herself and she can punch really hard, but it just wasn't that interesting. But thankfully the supporting cast was really good. Foo Fighters was one of my favorite Jo Bros, and I still don't really understand how her stand works. Like, she can turn her hand into a gun, but she's also like able to like heal people. But her story arc was really good and unique, and when she died, I'm not gonna lie, I teared up a little bit. Naruto I liked a lot. His story development was very cool. He was funny, and there was even like a moment where he was sacrificing himself to protect Julian, and that like also got me tearing up. So there's a lot of like sad moments in this arc. And he also had a pretty interesting and unique stand also, which kind of makes me wish that they kind of gave his stand to Jolene instead, since it was way more interesting than, I can turn my finger into a string. Weather Report, I like this character a lot, his backstory and how he ends up turning from good to evil when he got his memories back. But his stand power was kind of confusing, where it went from, oh, I can make it so that it rains, to I can turn everyone to snails through subliminal messaging. Like, I get that's JoJo, but it just felt a little too ridiculous. But that's JoJo. And then we got Hermes Costello, and I just didn't care for her character that much. She was like missing for half the manga, and I just didn't even care. And her stand power was just kind of weird, and she puts like stickers on things, and it just multiplies, and when you take it off, it goes back and damages it. It was just a little too specific, and it wasn't used a lot, so it just kind of felt like a waste. I feel like it would have been better if she was just swapped with Guess, aka Goo Dolls, because her stand power could have been utilized a lot more, and they should have just had Kiss for the beginning of the story, in my opinion. But now let's talk about the villain, which is Pucci, that I loved. And unlike the JoJo's, the villains are usually end up being the best written characters for the arc. I mean, the first part we got Dio that I love, then we got Pillar Man, which I loved even more. Then we got Dio again. Then we got Kira, which is also amazing. And then we got Diavolo, which is... I don't really like him that much besides his Doppio counterpart. And then we got Pucci, which is very well written. And then since I love Dio, it was really cool to see what he was up to during events of part 3 and before that during his resurrection. And this idea of obtaining heaven and gravity, even though it doesn't really make any sense, it just talks to my like primal senses, if that makes any sense to you. So I love the villain of the series and the story in general. And I also love how the story is pretty much the same thing as part 3, in the sense that part 3, Jotaro's mom goes into a coma because of Dio's curse, and they have to save her. And in part 6, Jolene's father goes into a coma because of Pucci, so they have to save him. Now heading towards the ending, I liked most of the fights, and yet the Dragon's Dream and the Survivor fight was a little too long, but it led up to the baby, and it was like, what is that? And then there's a Yo-Yo Mama fight, which I didn't mind too much because I feel like in the anime adaptation, it's gonna be like the best fight because it's just so stupid and funny. But the Sons of Dio fight was just meh. First of all, they allude to Giorno being in Florida. So I'm like, oh shit, is he gonna join in the battle? Is he gonna fight against Pucci or maybe against Jolene since he's one of Dio's sons? And is he gonna bring Polnareff since Polnareff is his like pet turtle now? But now they just don't show him or acknowledge him, so that was like a big bummer. And the fight against the Sons of Dio were kind of lame and drawn out. Like it was cool that all the Dio sons ended up being like complete losers, while Giorno became like the biggest mafia boss in Italy at the age of 15. So he kind of got the good end of the stick when it comes to genetics, but his brother's stands were kind of stupid. First we got the Bohemian Rhapsody, which can turn all fictional characters around the world to real and they go around killing everyone. I mean, it's kind of a ridiculous strong stand that just affects the entire world. But I don't know, I just didn't like it that much. Maybe in the anime I'll like it better, but one thing I did notice while reading the manga was that fight scenes were just hard to keep a track of compared to the anime. Like while reading the manga where I would just be looking at the fight scenes and like having no idea what's going on. But anyways, then we get the second Dio song, which is the Sky High, which controls these like flying worms and then he like gets killed. But then we got the last one, which is Donatella with the Underworld, and he got the most screen time and actually had a backstory, so he was kind of interesting. But again, his stand power was a little confusing and weird. Like he like made it so that Jolene was stuck in an airplane underground, but it's like, why didn't Jolene just like punch through the airplane, just get out, since Donatella was just like standing outside the airplane? But whatever, I'm hoping for it to make more sense in the anime because it could be just that I'm not used to seeing fights in the manga form, so hopefully in the anime that fight scene will be better. But right before we got to the end, we had the heavy weather arc, which was amazing. And even though the stand power made no sense because at first they were saying that if you touch the snails, then you turn into a snail. But then they explained that people were turning snails because they saw subliminal messages in the clouds. But I don't know, it was just kind of out there, but it was still a cool sequence. But now let's talk about that ending, which I kind of got spoiled because everyone was talking about it on different forums and on YouTube videos that have nothing to do with that ending. But good thing, since most people don't understand it, they technically didn't spoil it. And I don't think I understand it completely either, and I don't think you're supposed to since it's such a cold ending and leaves it very open, which is actually a good thing since that means Araki could technically go back to it one day if he chooses. Now the fighting leading up to them all going to the ocean was amazing and I can't wait for it to see it in the anime. But then Pucci technically kills them all, except for Emporio, which we didn't talk about him yet. But I love this character, and also he's one of the best sporting characters in my opinion. And then Emporio killing Pucci with Weather Report's ability was beautiful in my opinion. And then he's kind of like resets the timeline, and now we all get to see the characters that living new lives with new names, except for Emporio, and it just kind of ends. I understand why a lot of people didn't like the ending. But after watching countless videos and reading different Reddit posts, I think I understand the ending as much as we can since we're giving so little. But the two things that got spoiled to me were technically not true in my opinion was that first, because of Pucci's actions that led to a new universe being created. That's how we got part 7, which is not true. Part 7 is just a reboot pretty much that takes place in an alternative universe. He was just trying to repeat the same universe with the same people where time accelerates all the way forward, that time repeats itself and everyone already knows their fate. And while he was doing that, he got killed by Imperio, which caused him to reset the time from beginning without Pucci. Which goes back to the second spoiler I got, which was that Jotaro gets killed, which is technically true, but also not since he got reset back into the timeline. And if you think that he's dead, you must also think that Jotaro was killed in part 4 by Tsudasto, because he technically got killed there also, but since time reverted back just like how it did with Pucci's stand. So a lot of people assume the ending was shitty because they think that it was just like a dream plotline, but it's actually far from that. It's great. Because of that, Jolene's name is changed to Irene, which is a huge plot point because of what happened at the end is that Pucci got erased from the timeline, which affected a lot of things in the last timeline, where Narancio is no longer a murderer, Orme's sister is still alive, and Weather Report is alone, which assumably means that he was no longer a twin, which means that he probably didn't get swapped out in the hospital and grew up with his biological parents. But most importantly, Jotaro didn't feel the need there to be another JoJo. Whatever Pucci caused before part 6 caused Jotaro to feel the need for there to be another JoJo to protect the world from Dio's curse. So he named his daughter Jolene Cujo. But Irene is not a JoJo, and he was able to stay in her life growing up besides chasing Stan users because of events of part 6, which ended up erasing Pucci from the universe. So all the events of part 6 was not for a waste, and all the events of part 6 ended the whole storyline. Dio's curse is over, which is very bittersweet since I've been following this storyline since I was a very little kid when I got the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure game on the PlayStation 1. And I love that game. Then I saw the original anime and I love that too. And now the anime series that started coming out, I've been watching those since they came out. And now I started reading part 7. And I'm still at the beginning and it's alright so far. Apparently it's really good according to everyone I heard of it from. But one thing that I keep doing is referencing old characters from other arcs. Like this is a little bit of a spoiler, but in the beginning, they're showing off like the racers for the Steel Ball Run, and Avdol is one of the racers. And that kind of makes me feel like Emporio at the end of part 6 where, I'm seeing my friends and they're alive once again, but they're not them anymore. Sure, Avdol is in part 7 and looks like him, but it's not the Avdol from part 3 with his memories and experiences, which is also just bittersweet, just like the end of part 6. Anyways guys, thanks for watching this video. I would love to hear about your thoughts on part 6. And I'm going to be reading all the comments on this video, so let me know if I got anything wrong, if you have your own theories, and if this video does well, then I'm gonna make more videos similar to it. Maybe another video like this when I finish reading part 7. But anyways guys, you guys can follow me on Instagram at YakAlmighty, and I have another YouTube channel called YakAlmighty where I teach photography and videography. But anyways guys, I'll see you guys in the next video, and goodbye.